Good morning and welcome back. If this is the first time you've come here, then perhaps you should start on chapter 1. This is chapter 4. But otherwise, my name is Catherine Kim and I am here to read my serial to you. Kindly forgive me being late this week. It has been a little insane here in Tokyo. The wind came through. March came early, and the winds came through here like they were not here to mess. It was gale force winds. It was loud. It was crazy. It kicked up all of the allergens from the whole country. It was amazing. I have been very congested and allergic to everything this week. And I am finally breathing relatively well, and my voice doesn't sound all, thick and grotty. Uh, so I hope you will forgive me for being a little late this week. um, I haven't not been working, if that makes sense. Haven't not. I have been working, even though I haven't been speaking very well. I've been working on the plot for the next season of Cursed Keepsakes. A lot is going to go on. Things will happen. And I did find out a lot more about Callum that I didn't know while I was writing season 1. I had an idea that something was going on with him. Like, I sort of had a vague idea of what was happening in his life, but I wasn't sure about it until I sat down to work out the plot and what happens. And then Callum started talking to me a little bit more, and yeah, I have imaginary friends, and they talk to me, and then I write things down. That's kind of how it goes. So, for what that's worth, it makes a lot of what happened in season 1 make more sense to me. And I can actually understand why he would have gone after Niko in the first place, way back in the Chicago decision. Which, if you haven't read that, I'll leave a link down below. It is a spin-off of one of my novels, but you don't need to have read the novel if you don't want to, although you should. At any rate, here we are in chapter 4 of Cursed Keepsakes. I hope you enjoy. So, how are we going to do this? Callum asked, nudging Niko out of his thoughts. I'm not sure. Niko felt his shoulders droop. He frowned at the boxes of books taking up half the truck. Hey, how'd you pay for this stuff? Callum asked. Not that it is your concern, but Wendy is subsidizing this purchase. I have ample funds in my store account, but it would get risky to have no emergency money held back. Niko had already had to pay for a new front window this year, thanks to this hoodlum, and cleaning costs, and new security, which was not inexpensive despite the very generous discount that Alec had arranged with his company. Callum nodded. Yeah, but that's not what I meant. You didn't fork over bags of cash for this, so what? You write a check? Callum paused and tipped his head. Do people even write checks anymore? Anyway, I meant literally, how did you get that chick the money, not where did it come from? Niko pulled in a deep breath through his nose, not sure where this was going. I arranged for a bank transfer. The sum was large enough I needed to authorize it anyway, although apparently Ms. Cartland takes credit cards or some sort of internet-based payment. I am unclear how that would work, but it was irrelevant. Wait, she takes credit cards? Callum turned to him with eyebrows heading towards his hair. That's fantastic! I imagine it is useful in this day and age, yes. Not as many people are carrying cash as they once did, even to estate sales and the like. Niko had very mixed feelings on that subject. On the one hand, it was rather convenient to keep access to your funds in one place, like a bank card. On the other hand, if the power went out, or the internet was down for some unknowable reason, that convenient access was rendered into nothing more than a piece of plastic trash. No, I mean that she might have records after all. If the humans that bought the cursed junk paid with their credit card, she'll have names and stuff. You can track them down that way. Niko blinked. Well, yes, that's true. But how would we get that information? It isn't as if she would simply hand it over if we asked. There must be some sort of confidentiality there must be some sort of confidentiality issues there. I certainly wouldn't hand over my customers' information without a warrant of some sort. Callum rolled his eyes. You're the one that freaked out. I mean, having seen a few of the books, I can't blame you. And that painting is creepy as fuck. That is some nasty work there. The stationery set was far worse. Niko shivered in memory. Now that he understood what he had reacted to, he was far more disturbed than he had been. I have heard of poison pen letters, but that set might actually kill someone. There you go. You've got to get that information in the morning when you see that lady again. Callum looked at him like Niko could just stroll over to Ms. Cartland and demand it. Yes, I can see it now. Good morning. We're here for the rest of the things, and also hand over all the private information you may have collected yesterday via the credit cards you accepted. It will not go well. We would be lucky she doesn't call the police on us. Callum sighed and rolled his eyes again. Man, for a bloodsucker, you're kind of bad at this. Use your whammy. My whammy? Yeah, the one you use on your victims. I mean, your, meals? Fuck, whatever you call them when you use actual people like a damn juice box, so they don't freak out about being assaulted. Callum sneered at the end of his thought. Niko stiffened. Most vampires prefer the term donor. Thank you very much, and it is considered extremely rude, not to say immoral and distasteful, to take blood without consent. Beyond that, I prefer bag donations from volunteers. Far less messy and stressful that way, and any reputable donation clinic will use sterile equipment, so quality is ensured. Insufferable thug. Callum stared at him for a long moment. Sure. Whatever. And along with your prissy high and mighty attitude, you're happy to let Chicago burn. I get it. Niko spluttered. What? How do you get from calling me a bloodsucker and insisting that I assault humans to watching Chicago burn after hearing that I prefer not to even meet those who choose to donate the blood that I live on? I don't like violence of any sort. Why on earth would I find pleasure in the destruction of my own home? Well, you sure don't seem willing to do what you have to. Callum sneered again, and then jumped up to grab the strap on the truck's door. You tell me you don't want to harm humans, then you let dangerous magical shit out there loose in the hands of humans who don't know what they're doing. You say you want to help, but then you flat out refuse to do whatever you can to get that shit back. Whatever, man. I'm taking this stuff back to Wendy. Callum seemed to suppress a shiver as he rounded the back of the truck and headed towards the driver's seat. How is a vampire trying to exist and live considered an assault worthy of being murdered, but using mental manipulation is not? Niko followed the elf around the truck. I don't know. When is being a serial killer okay, but interrogating a witness with vital information that could save the city not okay? Callum fired back. You can't have it both ways, child. Niko yelled as Callum climbed behind the wheel. Either I'm a villain or a hero. I can't be both. The truck door slammed and the engine roared to life, nearly deafening the quiet residential street. The echo of the engine noise and the sound of some birds startled out of a nearby tree and complaining about it reminded Niko of where he was. The middle of a street full of likely human residents was not the place for this argument. Not that it was an argument particularly. The truck disappeared down the street, taking Callum with it, and Niko muttered under his breath as he turned to walk to his car. The wind had picked up as the sun set, and now, out of the shelter of the truck's boxy sides, it cut through him like knife blades on any exposed flesh. Once he was in his car with the engine warming up, Niko grumbled again and waited for hot air to start trickling from the vents. What right does that child have to say such things? He tried to murder me! Niko carefully pulled into the street and began to drive back to the shop. He still had a shop full of items purchased from the previous estate sales he had gone to. Thankfully not even close to as eventful as this one, and he also had the few things that he had picked here that were mercifully enchanted. Or perhaps just not maliciously enchanted. Niko was far too exhausted to worry about the semantics of it all right now. Callum had declared everything in his car to be safe enough to sell to the general public, and that's all Niko cared about. Though why he should take Callum's word for it, he had no idea. Wendy had assured him, when he texted her questions earlier in the afternoon, that Callum was rather sensitive to magic. She said that she suspected he was an untrained enchanter, but had not been able to get the young elf to discuss it with her yet. Wendy, it seemed, trusted the boy for some reason. Considering that she had been working with him and his two equally murder-minded friends ever since they had tried their hand at vampire hunting last spring, she should know them all reasonably well. Although, as they both had mentioned, she was being run off her feet in the past few months as Chicago's non-human community adjusted to her authority. Maybe she simply didn't know the boys as well as she assumed. Considering Callum's attitude toward Niko, that seemed a fair assumption. Use my whammy. Niko couldn't believe Callum had even thought to suggest such a thing. If he was inclined to use his vampiric abilities like that, wouldn't he have done so when threatened with death? Granted, he couldn't hold 3 people under his control at one time, but he would have caught one of them and evened the odds a bit, wouldn't they think? And what had made them so cocky about confronting him in the first place, anyway? If they thought he was some sort of violent psychopath murdering his way through meals with all the strength and skills that are attributed to vampires, how did they expect to come out the winners in that confrontation? Callum must not have much faith in Niko's whammy. Ugh. Now Niko was thinking of that word, and he was thinking it in sneering italics. Capitalized. He had to shake this mood. Parking in the tiny space allotted to him in the narrow alley behind his shop, Niko huffed a decisive breath and nodded to himself. He would put the whole matter out of his mind and focus on putting his new finds out in his shop. That was the whole point of today, after all. The things that he had purchased over the day filled his car, but looked sadly sparse in his store. The mirror, which Callum had said was enchanted, but only lightly and with a benign charm, reflected his frown back at him in the dim light of the storefront. Niko usually found the faintly yellow tone of the old-fashioned bulbs to give a comforting light, and considered the effect cozy. This evening, though, looking around at the new displays he had set up, he shivered. It looked oddly sterile. No, not sterile. Dead. Lifeless. Where Niko could usually look around his shop and think of the lives these items had touched, and the lives they would go on to touch as he sold them, tonight he looked around and saw Mr. Whitley's empty bedroom. The room the man had once shared with his wife, both of them now gone. He saw the little vignette that Ms. Cartland had staged to make people who walked through see the appeal of the items, and easily imagined the elderly man laying his book down on the bedside table before turning off the lights for the night. In his mind he saw the old man getting up in the morning, glancing at his wife's jewelry box containing several of the cursed pieces, then finding his way to the study to pay bills with a stationery set emanating darkness beside him. Had he known? Was Mr. Whitley the sort of man who cast dark enchantments on innocent objects? If he was, why the innocent ones in the guest room? The playful ones in the living room? Niko remembered the empty space on the desk where the set had been, lost to a sale before Niko realized the danger surrounding him. A shiver raced down his spine, wondering what the elegant pen had been enchanted to do, what the small desk organizer was intended for beyond holding the pen, inkwell, and notepad. Poison pen indeed. If the humans that bought the cursed junk paid with their credit card, she'll have their names and stuff. You can track them down that way, Callum had suggested. It was a good suggestion, too, and it had been made in the spirit of the tentative peace they had established while packing the books away. But then the suggestion that came hard on the heels of the first was for Niko to use his mesmerization to get the information. Niko wasn't even sure he could remember how to use the skill. The last time he had used it was... He frowned, thinking hard. It was before he and his mother had fled. Heavens, that was almost a century ago now. Mesmerization had been one of Damien's favorite skills, and after everything, Niko felt ill when he tried to use it. Even with his last identity change, he had used other methods than simply walking into the government offices necessary and getting unwitting human help. On the other hand, as much as he was loath to admit it, Callum had a point. Niko shuddered to think what could happen if humans started dying because of curses or dark enchantments. More than 1 or 2 deaths of that sort, even in a city the size of Chicago, could easily draw the attention of hunters, to say nothing of the unknowing humans. If they wanted to get the dangerous items out of human hands, did he really have a choice? Well, I hope you'll forgive me for the slight interruption in the middle. I think I came back to it without too much trouble and edited it out, but my husband called me right in the middle of recording, so... we shall see next week what happens, whether or not Niko uses his whammy to help them find the rest of the things. And we'll find out what happens. See you next week.